We saw a titanic clash between Newcastle and Arsenal. Arteta's been under a lot of criticism in the past weeks. He answered the call. Came out with a more offensive leaning midfield, which is what everyone has been asking for. Started as a number 10 against a team that is very, very physical. It would have been easy for Arteta to justify starting Mikel Merino due to his physicality. He listened, he learned. First half, I think Arsenal approached the game in a more adventurous manner, created a lot of chances. Eze in particular had a few chances, and Nick Pope in goal was incredible. But the signs were there for Arsenal that they could get the breakthrough. Newcastle did get ahead with a Voltemata header, well-taken header. Second half, we saw Arsenal really press the issue where Arteta made a series of changes through the kitchen sink at Newcastle, essentially. And in the past, we haven't seen that kind of response from Arteta. He took the initiative, was proactive, went after the game, and got his result. A dramatic late winner from Gabriel. Once again, a set piece playing its role for Arsenal. Fan, I was over the moon. Very happy from the beginning because I saw the lineup that I've been asking to see. But beyond that, the way the team approached the game, I was very impressed with. Newcastle, we know how difficult it can be to play against them at St. James's Park. Arsenal have really struggled against Newcastle at their ground. This was a blueprint for success for the future, I feel, in those big, tough games. And we see Arteta now being a bit more adventurous, and as a fan, that's all I can ask for.
Do you really think this is a blueprint? Would you want to be in these situations where you're chasing the game and you have to score in the last minute of stoppage time? Or would you rather have control and be ahead 2-1 as opposed to down 1-0? Arteta should get some applause for being willing to go after the game, to chase the game when he needed to, and utilize his depth. And I think this game was a very clear indication of why depth is so important in the Premier League. We see Newcastle bring on players who really could not affect the game. And on the other hand, for Arsenal, you have Odegaard, you had Saliba, Martinelli come off the bench. So we're talking about players of a totally different class. I think despite being at St. James's Park, which I agree is an incredibly difficult place to play, I still think with their squad, this is a team that should be able to handle a Newcastle team. I like the lineup from Arteta to a certain extent. However, I still have this belief that Zubimendi is not the right fit for an Arsenal team that is on the front foot. I see Zubimendi receive the ball, and what I like about him is when he receives the ball with his back facing the goal that he's attacking, he drops the shoulder and then turns and looks forward. However, when he looks forward, he doesn't play the ball forward, which is the difference between, I think, a top player and a player who doesn't really have an impact. And I think Zubimendi...
Respond, because you made 2 points. Is it a blueprint for Arsenal? I do believe that they were unlucky not to score and not to be ahead. They created a host of chances in the first half. Football is a funny game, and you can be the better team and still end up 1-0 behind. The way that they approached the game and the amount of chances that they created in a hostile environment is definitely a blueprint for success. The second point about Zubimendi, I really do believe that he provides the right balance with Declan Rice and an offensive midfielder. Declan Rice is going to do what he does. He's going to get the ball, he's going to look up, he's going to drive. Zubimendi is there to shield the back four so that Declan Rice can roam if need be. Declan Rice has the range of passing that you need from that position. He is the quarterback, essentially. You don't have two quarterbacks on the team. You don't need two players doing the same job. What Zubimendi does is those short passes that keeps the rhythm flowing. He allows Declan Rice to get the ball in a position where he can look for it and play a long ball or drive in between the lines while still holding that central position defensively. And we have an offensive midfielder who can create those penetrative passes. Sure, we would like to see Zubimendi do everything, but I think it's the right balance. You have a player who is keeping the tempo, keeping the rhythm, and allowing other players to express their qualities.
I would agree with that if that led to the results that you would expect from balance. But what I see is that, at least in this game against Newcastle, Arsenal were down 1-0. Zubimendi got subbed out and Arsenal came back and won the game. I think him being taken off the pitch was actually the key to unlocking their ability to attack and get results from the attack. The one thing about Zubimendi, if he is shielding the back four, then I don't think he's doing a great job, because I do remember Jacob Murphy getting a counterattack, basically broke the entire back line of Arsenal. And it was Declan Rice who had to track back, being the top player that he is, was able somehow to catch up to him.
Arsenal dominated the midfield, and to dominate the midfield against Newcastle with their physicality, their power, their grit says a lot about his quality. We know he scored goals a few weeks ago, but he's not in the team to score goals. That's a bonus. He keeps the structure and he allows Rice to express himself in a more offensive capacity. He can add some elements to his game, of course. Arteta clearly has a lot of faith in him, and we know how defensive-minded Arteta is. That tells you all that you need to know.
I think Declan Rice is a top player who shouldn't be shackled. And what I see him doing is playing a more reserved than he did in previous seasons when he's playing with Zubimendi. I just believe that his game is being affected negatively. And yes, they did well as a team, Arsenal, against Newcastle. But again, I think if you have one of the top players in the league not being able to exert his influence in the methodology that he can because of the player he's playing next to, in my opinion, then I think that's a little bit of an issue. I lose track of Zubimendi in the game. I don't see him making lots of tackles, drawing yellow cards, being an enforcer. I really don't know what he does besides play lateral passes. He keeps possession of the ball, great. But there are a lot of players who have played in that position over time who, when they only play lateral passes, they find themselves on the bench, because what you need at this level is a player who can do more than that.
Well, we saw him score 2 goals. And at this point, the fact of how good he is technically, right? The technique says it all. That's a technically gifted footballer. He plays on the Spanish national team. He was courted by Manchester City, by Liverpool, by Arsenal, 3 of the biggest clubs in England. Arteta has chosen him to start at Arsenal in the holding midfield role. They can't all be wrong, right? They can't all be wrong.
Back to the point about playing Odegaard and Eze at the same time with Declan Rice, which is what we saw when Arsenal came back and absolutely just overpowered Newcastle. And I understand the dynamic in the game had shifted, and Newcastle were protecting the lead. They had taken off some of their players who were more attacking minded. So they were sitting deeper, and it allowed Arsenal to be able to attack in that way. But I do feel that once I saw Odegaard come onto the pitch with Eze, Newcastle didn't know where to focus. Should they focus on Eze or should they focus on Odegaard? And we saw Odegaard actually looking like the Odegaard of 2 years ago, playing penetrative passes, being positive because he was brought on for that purpose. And I think with these two players together, a lot of times there's this feeling like you can't play 2 creative players together. I think the secret sauce for Arsenal will be when they figure this out. And it doesn't have to be every game. It doesn't have to be in every moment. But I think what we saw was a demonstration of a team when they have these 2 players pulling the strings. It's almost impossible to stop them from getting chances. And it appears that now Arteta is open to trying different things. He's adjusting, he's learning, he's growing. And Arsenal should only get better. This was a big, big test for their title credentials. They needed to win this game. It was a must-win game early in the season. They pulled it out, and now they're only 2 points behind Liverpool. So the title race is on. What does that say if we think about Newcastle and their future? We always talk about their midfield. Tonali, Joe Linton, Bruno Guimaraes didn't really have a stranglehold on this game, but they did play physical. They did disrupt Arsenal for a period of the game. Do you see Newcastle with the impending introduction of Johan Wissa, and when Gordon gets up to speed, maybe Elanga integrates into the squad? Do you see this as a team that can compete for the top 4 again, or will they just fall by the wayside?
Newcastle have gotten off to a shaky start this season. The unsettling force of Isak and having to handle that situation disrupted their preseason and the start of their season to a certain extent. I think the verdict is still out on Newcastle. Votamada seems like a great acquisition, player who, for his size, skillful on the ball, is good in tight spaces, but also has that obvious aerial threat. So they have answers offensively. We know what Gordon can bring. Elanga, I thought he started the season pretty brightly for Newcastle. Jacob Murphy is always dangerous with his crosses. So I think they still have the recipe to compete at the top level. The midfield, it's one of the strongest midfields in the Premier League. Defensively, I think they're solid. Nick Pope, I saw an incredible performance from him. One error of judgment, but incredible performance all around from him. We have to see what they have on the bench and if the depth is there to really compete over a long season. But I think their starting 11 certainly is good enough to compete with any of the top teams. It's just a matter of staying healthy, being consistent. I'm a fan of Eddie Howe. I think he's a very good coach, intelligent football mind, and obviously he has the support of his players. Are they at that elite level? I don't think so. I think they're a slight step below the top teams. But on their day, they can challenge the big boys.
Yeah, on their day, they can beat anyone. If they have an injury, then all of a sudden they drop into sort of not a mediocre team, but just an above average team. And the lack of depth in the midfield could be the issue for Newcastle this season. If they get an injury to one of these three players, and Joe Ellington, we know, is very injury prone already, was out earlier this season for a bit. If these guys are not fit, then I think the prospects for them being able to withstand a Champions League campaign and a Premier League campaign simultaneously is low. But what I will say is their defense looks really strong. When Newcastle brought in Dan Burn from Brighton, no one thought that was a big signing. No one thought that was a savvy move. They were just like, oh, they're just getting numbers, to just have some depth. But this guy has grown. We saw Thomas Tuchel bring him in to the England team and well deserved. So I can see them challenging for the top four, making a little bit of noise in the Premier League, maybe knocking off some of the bigger contenders. Props to Eddie Howe for what he's able to get out of a side that's not nearly as deep as many of the other teams that he's competing with at this level.